Apostolic Succession of the True Orthodox Church of Greece, Part 1, translation of the article by Stavro Markou. The True Orthodox Church of Greece, Synod of Metropolitan Kyriakos, has true apostolic succession from both the Orthodox Church of Greece and the Ecumenical Patriarchate, as evidenced by the following facts. A. Apostolic succession from the Orthodox Church of Greece through Metropolitan Germanos of Demetrias. Metropolitan Germanos of Demetrias. In 1907, Metropolitan Theoclitus of Athens, first hierarch of the Orthodox Church of Greece, consecrated Hieromonk Germanos Mavromatis as Bishop of Demetrias in Thessaly. In 1918, Metropolitan Theoclitus was uncanonically deposed, and the Freemason Meletios Metaxakis usurped the Athenian throne at the behest of Prime Minister Eleftherios Venizelos, another Freemason. Then, also thanks to Meletios, who rejected the Greek monarchy and commemorated Venizelos at services instead of the king, a schism arose in Greece. The Orthodox of Greece were then divided into Royalists and Venizelosians. Metropolitan Germanos fought on the side of the Royalists, who were also supported by Saint Nectarios of Aegina and Matthew Karpafakis of Athos. In 1920, Metropolitan Germanos convened a synod that was able to overthrow Metaxakis. Metropolitan Germanos then became the locum tenens of the Metropolitan throne of Athens, but the next synod reinstated Theoclitus as Metropolitan. In 1923, Metropolitan Theoclitus was again uncanonically removed, and the infamous Chrysostomos Papadopoulos, another Freemason and close friend of Meletios Metaxakis, usurped the throne. In 1924, Chrysostomos Papadopoulos convened a minor council of only 5 bishops, including himself. At this minor council, he proposed the introduction of a new calendar, which had been condemned by several pan-Orthodox councils. Of the other 4 hierarchs present, 2 voted for the change in the calendar and 2 against. Metropolitan Chrysostomos, by adding his vote in favor of the innovation, thus won the position of 3 bishops against 2. This completely banded council ignored the desire of the other 50 bishops of the Orthodox Church of Greece to retain the old calendar, and they were informed of the change in the calendar by telegraph. Metropolitan Germanos of Demetrias did not accept the change of the calendar in his diocese until he was forced to do so by the government in 1928, and even then he still celebrated according to the Orthodox calendar privately. In 1932, he was invited to Italy, where he proclaimed the Confession of Faith and celebrated the service together with the hierarchs of the True Orthodox Church of Southern Italy, which remained faithful to the Orthodox calendar. During his stay in Italy, he participated as a witness in the consecration of the new bishop, Confessor Gennadios Philippucci. But after returning to Greece, he again left the Confession of Faith because of persecution. However, in 1935, together with 3 other Greek hierarchs, he returned to the Orthodox patristic calendar and was received into communion with the True Orthodox Church of Greece, which until then had been headed by Archimandrite Matthew Karpafakis. Metropolitan Germanos and the other bishops signed 2 official encyclicals, both of which contained a confession of faith condemning the new calendar as a blasphemous innovation, cursed by the pan-Orthodox councils, and declaring that the new calendarists were genuine schismatics, both potentially and actually, and therefore lacked the grace-filled sacraments. That same year, together with 2 other bishops, he consecrated 4 new bishops, including Father Matthew himself, who became Bishop of Vrestheno. That same year, one of the returning hierarchs and 2 of the newly consecrated bishops returned to the new calendar schism. In 1937, Metropolitan Germanos of Demetrias violated the Confession of Faith of the first 2 encyclicals he had signed in 1935, declaring that the new calendarists were only potentially but not actually schismatics, and that they actually had the genuine sacraments, and that the new calendarist church was the mother church, while the old calendarists were merely a vanguard fighting from within that same church. Therefore, bishops Matthew of Vrestheno and Germanos of Cyclades broke away from Metropolitan Germanos because of his crypto-ecumenical heresy. Metropolitans Germanos of Demetrias and Chrysostom of Florin. Theophany of 1937. In 1938, Metropolitan Germanos of Demetrias, together with Chrysostomos, the former Metropolitan of Florina, petitioned to be received back into the State Church of Greece as bishops, but both petitions were rejected. In 1943, the former Metropolitan of Florina, Chrysostomos, broke communion with Metropolitan Germanos of Demetria and declared himself chairman of his own group of Florinites. Metropolitan Germanos of Demetrias petitioned a second time to be received into the state church. However, he died in 1944 before his petition was granted. He was buried by the new calendarist official church anyway. In any case, Metropolitan Germanos of Demetrias was a fully Orthodox bishop since the proclamation of the Confession of Faith of 1935, and had been legitimately consecrated by Metropolitan Theoklitos of Athens and the Holy Synod of the Orthodox Church of Greece in 1907. Thus, when in 1937, he, together with two other legitimately recognized Orthodox hierarchs, consecrated Archimandrite Matthew Karpathakis as Bishop of Rethina, he transmitted to him the Apostolic Succession of the Orthodox Church of Greece in its fullness, categorically and sacramentally valid and complete. Bishop Matthew of Rethina is therefore a canonical bishop of the true Orthodox Church of Greece. Apostolic Succession of the True Orthodox Church of Greece, Part 2. B. Apostolic Succession from the Ecumenical Patriarchate through Metropolitan Chrysostomos of Florina, Metropolitan Chrysostomos Kavorides of Florina. In 1908, the Patriarch of Constantinople, Joachim III, and his Holy Synod consecrated Hieromonk Chrysostomos Kavorides as Bishop of Imbrousa to serve in the Diocese of Pelagonia, now a region in the newly formed state of Macedonia. This consecration took place before the publication of the Ecumenical Encyclical of 1920 and before the uncanonical introduction of the new calendar in 1924. Therefore, the consecration of Chrysostomos itself was, as well as that of Germantus of Demetrias, categorically and sacramentally valid and complete, and both the one who performed it and the one who was consecrated were Orthodox. When Meletios Metaxakis uncanonically usurped the patriarchal throne of Constantinople in 1920, Bishop Chrysostomos of Imbrousa opposed this impiety and moved to Athens. In 1924, on the eve of the introduction of the new calendar, he was elected Metropolitan of Florina, in an area still under the jurisdiction of the Ecumenical Patriarchate at that time. In March 1924, 5 bishops of the Church of Greece met in a minor council and uncanonically adopted the new calendar without taking into account the opinion of the other bishops of the Church. But this decision was not carried out by the Metropolitan of Florina, since he still belonged to the Ecumenical Patriarchate. In October 1924, the Ecumenical Patriarchate also introduced the new calendar, but even then Metropolitan Chrysostomos did not accept the innovation in his diocese. In 1928, the dioceses of Macedonia were transferred to the Church of Greece, and Chrysostomos, as Bishop of Florina, was summoned to Athens in 1929. At the session of the Council of Bishops, Archbishop Chrysostomos Papadopoulos of Athens proposed to the hierarchs to adopt an encyclical letter which would legitimize the uncanonical introduction of the new calendar and condemn those who remained on the old calendar. Of the 44 bishops present at the council, 13 immediately left the council, 27 refused to sign, and only 4 bishops signed for the final adoption of the new style. Metropolitan Chrysostomos of Florina was among the bishops who immediately left the council in disgust. After this, Chrysostomos became seriously ill and was hospitalized in a hospital where he remained for 3 years. In 1930, he resigned as Metropolitan of Florina, retaining the title of bishop. After his resignation, he called himself former Metropolitan of Florin and retained this name until his death. He began to live in Athens. In 1934, he met with members of the true Orthodox Church who remained faithful to the patristic tradition and the old calendar for Orthodox worship. He expressed his desire to join them and lead them, since he too was against the uncanonical adoption of the new calendar. Chrysostomos of Florin had discussions with Metropolitan Germanos Mavromatis of Demetrias and Chrysostomos Demetrios of Zakynthos, who, like him, strongly objected to the change of the calendar at the Council of 1929. In January 1935, Chrysostomos of Florin attended the service of Theophany in Phaleiro, Athens, which was conducted by Archimandrite Matthew Karpathakis, in the presence of at least 30 priests and thousands of faithful. In May of the same year, Bishops Germanos of Demetrias, Chrysostomos of Florin, and Chrysostomos of Zakynthos returned to the Orthodox patristic calendar and condemned the state church as schismatic and deprived of the grace of the Holy Spirit. This ecclesiological position was formulated in 2 encyclicals published in the same year. Since Bishops Germanos of Demetrias and Chrysostomos of Florin were consecrated in 1907 and 1908 respectively, they were received into the church through confession of faith and repentance. However, since Bishop Chrysostomos of Zakynthos was consecrated by new calendar hierarchs, the first 2 bishops received him into the church through laying on of hands. In the same year, Bishops Germanos of Demetrias, Chrysostomos of Florina, and Chrysostomos of Zakynthos consecrated 4 new bishops, namely Germanos Varikopoulos as Bishop of the Cyclades, Polycarp Leosis as Bishop of Diavlia, Christopher Hagis as Bishop of Megara, and Matthew Karpathakis as Bishop of Restini. However, due to persecution by the state, Bishops Chrysostomos of Zakynthos, Polycarp of Diavlia, and Christopher of Megara fell away again to the new calendar almost immediately in 1935. In 1937, Bishops Germanos of Demetria and Chrysostomos of Florin abandoned the Orthodox ecclesiology proclaimed in 1935 and began to declare that they were not the hierarchy of an independent Orthodox church, but rather members of the new calendar state church of Greece, which they already considered their mother church and the source of grace from which their sacraments were blessed. Because of this ecclesiological heresy, Bishops Germanos of Cyclades and Matthew of Vresthenos broke communion with them and headed the true Orthodox Church of Greece, which remained unsullied in its Orthodox confession of faith. In 1938, Bishops Germanos of Demetrias and Chrysostomos of Florina petitioned to be received back into the state church and to be given their former dioceses. The state church rejected the petitions. In 1943, Bishop Chrysostomos of Florina broke communion with Bishop Germanos of Demetrias. The latter again petitioned to be received into the new calendar state church of Greece, but died in 1944 before his petition was granted. He was buried by the new calendar hierarchs anyway. Bishop Chrysostomos of Florina, although a retired bishop since 1930 and having held no real see, that is, therefore only the former metropolitan of Florina, contrary to the canons, declared himself chairman of his group for the first time in 1943. He submitted a petition to the Patriarchate of Jerusalem to receive him and his group into communion, but the petition was rejected, and he was offered to be received only as a monk. Bishop Chrysostomos of Florina did not accept this offer. In 1944 and 1947, Chrysostomos of Florina wrote 2 encyclicals in which he officially confirmed his ecclesiological heresy. In 1946, Bishops Polycarp of Diaolia and Christopher of Megara left the state church and entered into communion with Bishop Chrysostomos of Florina. In 1947, just like Sergius Stragorotsky with his blasphemous declaration of 1927, Chrysostomos of Florina openly praised Stalin. Only 12 days after Bishop Matthew's death in May 1950, Bishop Chrysostom of Florence suddenly changed his mind and repented of his ecclesiological heresy, inviting Bishop Matthew's successor bishops and his clergy to join him, Chrysostom. However, a few months later, Bishop Chrysostom stated in a letter to the authorities that he had signed his 1950 encyclical only to tempt the Matthewites to submit to him so that he could take the 2 largest Matthewite monasteries in Kuvara and Karatea. He did indeed succeed in taking the monastery in Kuvara, but not in Karatea. Metropolitan Chrysostom of Florin during his exile in Mytilene. In 1951, Bishop Chrysostomos and the bishops who supported him attempted to negotiate union with the new calendarist State Church of Greece so that the old calendarist parishes, although following the old calendar, would begin to commemorate the new calendarist bishop of the diocese, and he, Chrysostomos, and his fellow hierarchs would withdraw from the episcopacy. Bishop Germanos of Cyclades agreed to this decision, but died before it could be implemented. Bishops Chrysostomos of Florina, Polycarp of Diolia, and Christopher of Megaria actually carried out this decision and withdrew from the episcopacy in 1952, instructing their parishes to submit to the local new calendarist bishops of each diocese. Bishops Polycarp and Christopher joined the state church and were restored to their episcopal dignity by the new calendarist church. Bishop Chrysostom of Florin, however, under pressure from a certain part of the clergy and laity, was forced to reverse his decision and return to the leadership of his group. In 1955, Chrysostom of Florin died and left his group without bishops. It should be noted that during Chrysostom's tenure as Bishop of Imbrusa, during his service in Pelagonia, his deacon and close companion was none other than Athenagoras Spirou, a Jew and a Mason, who was ordained in 1922 by, what irony, Chrysostom and Theoclitus of Athens as Bishop of Corfu and later became the Ecumenical Patriarch of Constantinople. Athenagoras, as is well known, became famous as a rabid ecumenist and destroyer of the Orthodox Church. Nevertheless, Chrysostomos, Kavarides, and Athenagoras always remained close friends, and Chrysostomos often visited Athenagoras when he was Bishop of Corfu. Their friendship continued even after Athenagoras became Patriarch of Constantinople and the leader of the ecumenist movement, making the Ecumenical Patriarchate a founding member of the World Council of Churches in Amsterdam in 1948, while Chrysostomos, unlike his illustrious comrade, seemed to position himself as the leader of the traditionalists. The fact of this sordid friendship reveals a dark side of Chrysostomos of Florina that is not yet well known. Apostolic Succession of the True Orthodox Church of Greece, Part 3. C. Apostolic Succession from Greece and Constantinople through Bishop Matthew of Rethina. His Beatitude, Matthew, Archbishop of the Orthodox Church of Athens and all Greece, Hieromonk Father Matthew Karpafakis, Rector of the Holy Ascension Church in the central Pankration district of Athens, 1916. In 1935, Archimandrite Matthew Karpafakis was consecrated Bishop of Rethina by Metropolitans Germanos of Demetrius, Orthodox Church of Greece, and Chrysostomos of Florina, Ecumenical Patriarchate of Constantinople, both of whom were still rightly recognized as Orthodox at that time. Therefore, the consecration of Matthew as Bishop of Rethina was categorically and sacramentally valid. In addition, Matthew was appointed by the Synod as Exarch of all the dioceses in the Peloponnese, in the southeast of which the ancient see of Rethina is located, as well as Exarch of the island of Crete, the Florinians denying the authority of Bishop Matthew of Rethina, as a supposedly titular bishop modestly prefer to keep silent about this fact. Thus, Bishop Matthew, in his Apostolic Succession, transmitted from the two bishops of Greece and Constantinople who consecrated him, and since he was given the power to care for both the dioceses of the Church of Greece, Peloponnese, and the dioceses of the Ecumenical Patriarchate, Crete, combined the succession from both the Church of Greece and the Ecumenical Patriarchate. In 1937, Bishops Matthew of Rethines and Germanos of Cyclades broke communion with Bishops Germanos of Demetrias and Chrysostomos of Florina, because the latter both blasphemed the Holy Spirit and proclaimed things contrary to the ecclesiological position of the first two synodal encyclicals of 1935. In 1943, Bishop Germanos of Cyclades also fell into the same heresy, declaring that he had not separated from the other bishops in 1937 for confessional reasons but for other reasons. Germanos of Cyclades also began to preach things contrary to holy tradition and shocked his flock by ordaining priests who were immoral. Therefore, Bishop Matthew of Rethines, and with him the clergy throughout Greece, broke communion with Germanos of Cyclades for confessional reasons. In addition, Germanos of Cyclades began to support the Communist Party of Greece, for which he was later imprisoned by the government for 2 years, 1947 to 1949. In 1949, Bishop Germanos of Cyclades united with Bishop Chrysostomos of Florina. In 1951, Germanos died. Bishop Matthew of Rethymnos, 1940. In 1948, seeing that the remaining bishops in Greece had become traitors, having apostatized from the Orthodox confession of faith, previously proclaimed in the two encyclicals of 1935, and had also become Sergianists and crypto-communists, and seeing that the genuine canonical hierarchs from abroad were unable to come to Greece for the ordinations, Bishop Matthew had no choice but to perform the ordinations of new bishops on his own. 1948. Ordinations of new bishops. Therefore, after the request of the clergy and faithful of the true Orthodox Church of Cyprus, who did not have a bishop, Hierarch Matthew of Rethines consecrated Bishop Spiridon of Trimethous as vicar bishop for the dioceses of Cyprus. Bishops Matthew and Spiridon jointly consecrated more bishops, and thus the Apostolic Succession, both in the true Orthodox Church of Greece and in the true Orthodox Ecumenical Patriarchate of Constantinople, united from that moment on, was preserved through the historical consecrations of 1935, 1948, and further in 1995 and 2008. Epiphany of 1949. Procession to the waters of Jordan, led by Archbishop Matthew. In 1949, Bishop Matthew of Rethino was elected Archbishop of Athens, and by his position was also locum tenens of the Patriarchal throne of Constantinople. In the same year, Archbishop Matthew and his synod anathematized Freemasonry, which was the anti-Christian force that caused the forced introduction of the new calendar and other innovations within the official Orthodox churches. Matthew reposed in the Lord on May 14, 1950. Blessed death. In 1959, his remains were opened and found to be streaming myrrh. According to his will, he was buried in the Holy Vidensky Convent for women in Karateia. In 1962, his relics were opened again and found to be streaming myrrh and fragrant. On the 40th day after Matthew's death, Saint Confessor Matthew Karpafakis of Rethino, an outstanding fighter of orthodoxy against the heresies and schisms of our times, was a visionary. He managed to preserve the true Orthodox Church in Greece and within the Ecumenical Patriarchate unharmed from the heresies and schisms of the Venezalites, Metaxacaesians, New Calendarists, Florinites, Sergianists, Ecumenists, and Crypto-Ecumenists, other confessors, Saints of the true Orthodox Church in Greece and within the Ecumenical Patriarchate were Chrysostomos, Bishop of Messenia, plus 1956, Matthew II of Rostheno, plus 1961, John of Thebes, plus 1964, Meletios of Megara, plus 1966, Agathangelos of Tinos, plus 1967, Demetrius of Thessaloniki, plus 1976, Bessarion of Trikala, plus 1977, Eumenios of Crete, plus 1981, Lazarus of Rostheno, plus 1989, Panaretos of Larissa, plus 2004, Gorgonios of Citrus, plus 2005, and Andrew of Patras, plus 2005. Other deceased hierarchs of the same apostolic succession were Spiridon of Trimouth and Epiphanius of Kishion of the true Orthodox Autocephalous Church of Cyprus. Today, the true successor of Bishop Matthew of Rosthenos and his apostolic succession is His Eminence, Metropolitan Kyriakos Kontogiannis, Metropolitan of Mesogia and Lavreotiki Kyriakos, Epiphany 2008. Since 1982, the latter has been the Secretary of the Holy Synod of the TOC of Greece. In 1995, he was consecrated Bishop of the Metropolis of Mesogia and Lavreotiki. Since 2005, he has been locum tenens of the Patriarchal Throne of Constantinople and locum tenens of the Archbishopric of Athens. Until more bishops are consecrated, he is currently Exarch of all Greece, the Ionian Islands, Western Europe, North and South America, East Asia, and Australia. He is assisted by the candidate for Bishop of the God-saved city of Larissa, Archimandrite Amphilohije, who until more bishops are elected is Exarch of Thessaly, Epirus, Macedonia, Thrace, Crete, and the Aegean Islands. The Holy Synod, chaired by Metropolitan Kyriak, is in full Eucharistic communion with the true Orthodox Patriarchate of Alexandria, whose locum tenens is Metropolitan Matthew of Kenya, with the true Orthodox Catacomb Church of Russia, led by Metropolitan Seraphim of Kiev, with the true Orthodox Autocephalous Church of Cyprus, led by Metropolitan Parthenius of Khitia, with the true Orthodox Church of Romania, led by Metropolitans Cassian of Bakuska and Gerontius of Francia. The following bishops of the true Orthodox Church of Greece were deprived of their spiritual rights when they fell into heresy and or schism. In 1935, bishops Chrysostomos, Demetrios of Zakynthos, Polycarp, Leosis of Diavlia, and Christophoros, Hagis of Megaria fell into the New Calendar Schism. In 1937, Metropolitans Germanos, Mavromatis of Demetrius, plus 1944, and the former Chrysostomos, Gavarides of Florin, plus 1955, fell into the Schism of Florianism, and the latter even fell into his own version of Sergianism. In 1943, Bishop Germanos Varacopoulos of Cyclades, plus 1951, fell into several ecclesiological heresies and into his own unique form of Sergianism, which led him into the Cycladic Schism, followed by his alliance with the heresy and schism of Chrysostomos of Florina in 1949. In 1958, Bishop Anthimus of Piraeus, plus 1999, fell into the New Calendarist Schism. At the same time, Bishop Theoclitus Cantaris of Salamis, plus 1991, was suspended from priesthood and became a wandering bishop in America with his own history. In 1977, Bishop Callistos of Corinth, plus 1985, fell into the Acacian Florinian Schism. In 1995, Bishops Gregory Russus of Messenia, Matthew Macris of Megaria, Theodosius of Theotis, Titus of Kozan, and Chrysostom, Metropolis of Thessaloniki fell into the Gregorian Schism. 5. In 2005, Bishops Nicholas Messiacharis of Piraeus, Pachomius of Argolis, Andrew Syros of Dialia, and Chrysostomos Syros of Philippi fell into the ecclesiological heresy of the Nicolaites. Bishops Galakian of Parasteria and Tarasios of Varia, although they do not agree with the ecclesiological heresy of the Nicolaites, nevertheless remain in communion with them, trying to fight from within. Thus, they can be considered among those who fell into heresy, although they personally are against the heresy supported by their fellow bishops. We hope that Bishops Galactian and Tarasios will come to their senses, break communion with the heretical Nicolaites, and return to communion with Metropolitan Kyriak of Mesogia and Lareotiki, and with the true Orthodox Church in general.